In my mini-boss guide video, I mentioned about pushing away smashers and mini-bosses with a melee weapon. That for certain is the Sir Lancelot. I kind of explained a little about it during that, so I thought about making a separate video for this melee weapon. I want to head down to what it does, how it works, perking it, and a spear loadout that I use. The Sir Lancelot is a part of the medieval weapon set in which was obtainable through the Winter Llamas for a limited time couple years before, but nowadays for some reason a schematic of one medieval weapon can possibly be available randomly throughout the weekly shop rotation, so it might be there or might not. It's kind of like the only way you can obtain the Sir Lancelot with gold without spending a weapon voucher. Honestly, I don't really recommend spending a voucher on a spear weapon unless you already have what you need and barely have anything much to spend them on. And with that, put it in your collection book if you're missing the schematic. But to be fair, this could be a fun weapon to go along in missions. I do get that the spear weapons in this game are kind of underrated just because of its damage output, but for this medieval spear, I'd say it's not just your average melee weapon. To me, it feels like this actually has a bit longer range when thrusting towards husks without any sort of repercussion. That being said, is where many people think the damage drop-off comes from. If you could utilize the Sir Lancelot properly, you would actually be impressed with how this spear would perform in your missions. It also has that heavy attack where you could charge and collect a group of husks in front of you and deal a ton of damage on the finishing blow. You can as well use the heavy attack against the riot husks and have their guard down, which they are the most annoying ones that push you with a fridge abruptly. The charge from the spear doesn't really get blocked by that, and they get dragged like every other husk, so that's quite a good bonus to have on such a spear. The cool thing is, you can also use the heavy attack against charging smashers as well. It stops them completely on impact, so it's not just a weapon that collects a crowd of enemies, it can also push away big targets as well. Speaking about big targets, mini-bosses. Mini-bosses like the Epic Husk and Husky don't get dragged off like the regular husks because they have an exceedingly increased impact threshold, but you can still push them by a half tile like the smashers. It works really well, especially for endurance players when they have to deal with a very high power level mini-boss that they cannot kill in a certain wave, but they can push them off elsewhere with this weapon to keep their builds safe. For this part, when it comes to perking, I have 3 of the same spear weapon with different perks for different purposes. The first one is basically a general build. It's what I use in most missions, and I supercharged it for the fun of it. You have the usual crit rating and crit damage perks for the critical hit coverage, with the added attack speed so the spear could thrust a little faster, and an overall damage perk. And because I use this build most of the time in missions, I have its element on energy to use against a variety of elemental enemies. I would blatantly consider this as my second Sir Lancelot because this Scrapper Spear schematic is a direct copy of the original. This spear weapon is a part of the Samurai Scrapper starter pack, which was available long ago and is currently not available. Since this imposter has a complete different design itself from the Sir Lancelot, I perked this strictly for endurance. I used to run Twine Endurance quite a lot when the bundle that came with it was still around. The double heavy attack efficiency helps the charge attack be a lot cheaper with energy cost, an armor perk just in case when facing a damaging mini-boss like Acid Pulse or Damage Pulse, and an impact perk to push them much more further. I haven't bothered making its element energy because mini-bosses in the endurance I have faced were mostly physical and few were elementals, so I kept it that way. The last and considerably strong is a pure crit build. I got this extra one from the weekly shop, so I thought about how hard this can hit when it's fully focused on critical hits. 2 crit damage perks resulted in having 320% critical hit damage, which is pretty high for a melee weapon, and with 1 crit rating is enough coverage to deal the critical hits. Having a 53% crit chance is actually a lot, and an overall damage perk for a small boost towards the total damage output. It can be in any element, by the way. I had it on nature because I tried testing it in a water storm mission. You can notice all 3 of my Sir Lancelots have the same 6th perk, which the one that grants 5 stacks of armor when hitting enemies for 5 seconds. It's a pretty useful perk, especially when attacking damage from husks while poking or charging with a spear. That way you won't take too much damage. This medieval spear would complement really well with a loadout that focuses well on spear weapons. I have mine with Deadly Lotus Luna as commander for her 50% increased spear damage buff against afflicted husks. While she is on lead, Deadly Lotus can apply affliction on enemies that would deal 18.5% weapon damage, and that is really strong in my opinion. With the Sir Lancelot 6 perk, you could possibly have armor and affliction at the same time. I use the Blast from the Past team perk, which has Paleo Luna and Prehistoric Isa in support, one that buffs melee weapon damage depending on health, and one that adds even more armor. Piercing Lotus Edge for the increased heavy attack efficiency for spears. I have Samurai Scrapper here and it's maxed out, but they both have the same hero perk. Deadly Blade Clash's perk apparently stacks really well with the lead's affliction perk. Any melee critical hit applies 30% snare and 37% affliction in support, which both perks make the spear deal a decent amount of damage. And lastly, Crossbone Barret as a utility support. Coconuts help boost damage by a little for a certain time, but to make a balance on the loadout, coconuts will definitely keep you healthy during any combat. What makes the Sir Lancelot a very unique weapon throughout the medieval set is not just because it's a spear. I personally think its thrusting attack synergizes really great with the charging attack, and with a loadout that buffs spear weapons, it would really show a promising potential that this weapon could be. Not just a damaging one, but it's able to stop smashers from charging, push big targets away. That's what makes the Sir Lancelot a really fun weapon to use. The perks and loadout is all what I use personally for my playstyle. Let me know what you think about the Sir Lancelot and how you approached it on your own in the comments. I'll see you guys later. Take care of yourself and love yourself.